The first story didn't start with a broken window or a masked figure in the yard. It started with the smell of my grandmother's perfume, a scent that hadn't been in that house for over a decade, a ghost in the air that wrapped around me the moment I turned the old heavy key in the lock. I just moved into the family place, a creaky two-story Victorian in a neighborhood where the streetlights buzzed like dying insects and the trees seemed to hold their breath. The inheritance was a blessing and a burden. The house was all mine, but it came packed with 40 years of memories, most of them dusty and silent. That first night was for unpacking the essentials, a ritual of claiming space. I was in the kitchen, surrounded by cardboard fortresses, the only light a dim bulb under the cabinet that painted the room in weak yellow tones. The air was a soup of dust motes and the stale, closed-up smell of a place unlived in. And then cutting through it all was that fragrance, Sweet Pea by Avon. Roses and talcum powder and something uniquely, painfully her. It was so vivid, so impossibly present, that my breath caught in my throat. I stood frozen, a stack of plates heavy in my hands, listening to the new old sounds of the house. The furnace groaned to life in the basement with a metallic shudder. The pipes ticked inside the walls. And then, underneath it, a soft, deliberate creak from the living room, the specific sound of the fifth floorboard from the fireplace, the one that only complained when stepped on directly. A cold droplet of fear traced my spine. I told myself it was the house settling, the natural contraction of old bones, but the perfume clung to the back of my tongue, a sweet, rotten anchor to reality. I set the plates down silently, the clink of ceramic on laminate absurdly loud. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I edged toward the kitchen doorway, my socks whispering on the linoleum, and peered into the living room's darkness. The streetlight outside cast long, skeletal shadows of the oak branches through the blinds, striping my boxes and the sheet-draped furniture like a cage. Nothing moved. But the smell was stronger here, mingled now with a new underlying note, the damp, rich scent of freshly turned earth, like a garden after a rain. My eyes, adjusting, swept the room and landed on the mantelpiece. I had placed a single framed photograph there earlier that afternoon. A picture of my grandmother and me at my high school graduation, her smile proud, my face awkward. It was now lying face down, the glass reflecting nothing but the dark wood beneath it. A silent scream tightened my throat. I had not touched it. I hadn't even been in this room for hours. As my gaze darted around, I realized the pattern of shadows near the hallway entrance was wrong. One shadow was too dense, too vertical. A man-shaped blot of deeper black against the gloom. It stood perfectly motionless, just beyond the threshold, as if waiting. I stopped breathing. The shadow did not move. We were locked in a silent, terrifying standoff. The perfume was now overpowering, cloying, mixed inextricably with that choking smell of soil. Every instinct told me to run, to flee out the back door into the cold night, but a stubborn, defensive anger began to burn through the fear. This was my house. My sanctuary. I had survived the grief of losing her, the paperwork, the move. I would not be driven out by a smell and a trick of the light. My hand crept along the countertop, fingers searching until they found the cool, heavy handle of the chef's knife I'd used to break down boxes. The moment my grip tightened, the shadow moved. It didn't lunge, it simply turned with a soft, shuffling sound and retreated down the hallway. My bedroom door, which I had left ajar, clicked shut softly. The finality of that sound was a shock to my system. Adrenaline, hot and metallic, flooded my mouth. It was in my bedroom. My phone, my weapon, my sense of safety were all in there. The front door was behind me, freedom just a few steps, but the thought of that presence in my most private space, among my things, ignited a furious courage. Knife held out before me, I moved, step by silent step, down the living room into the mouth of the hallway. My bedroom door was closed, a bar of utter darkness sealing its base. From within, a new sound began. A soft, rhythmic scritch like fingernails, long and careful, dragging down the inner surface of the wooden door. Then a voice. It was my grandmother's voice, but pulled thin and watery, a recording played back on a damaged tape. It called my childhood nickname, the one only she used. Mikey, the soil is so cold, Mikey. Let me in. I just want to get warm. The sound unhinged me. It was a perverse lullaby. This was not her. This could not be her. But the longing in that distorted tone was a hook in my heart. The scratching continued, a macabre accompaniment. I lifted the knife, my palms slick. Some part of me, the part that still needed to say goodbye, that needed to prove this was just a nightmare, overrode the animal terror. I threw the door open with a crashing force, the knife raised to strike. The room was empty. The window was shut, locked, frost etching its edges. My phone glowed peacefully on the nightstand. But on my bed, centered meticulously on the floral duvet I'd inherited from her, was a single mud-caked gardening trowel. The metal was stained with old rust and fresh, dark soil. The smell of damp earth here was a physical presence, thick enough to taste. I staggered back, the knife lowering uselessly. I checked the closet, empty. I dropped to my knees and looked under the bed, nothing but dust. As I knelt there, panting, feeling the world warp around me, the old house phone in the kitchen began to ring. The sound was a jagged tear through the silence. I stumbled toward it, a pathetic lifeline to normalcy. I snatched the receiver. "Hello?" Static hissed, then cleared. And her voice came through, not thin or watery, but perfectly warm, loving and clear, just as I remembered it from 1,000 Sunday phone calls. "Michael, sweetheart," she said, her tone gently chiding. "Why did you let them in? You shouldn't have opened the door when you came home." The line went dead with a soft click. I stood there, the dial tone buzzing like a trapped insect in my ear, the pieces crashing together with devastating clarity. The invasion hadn't started tonight with the perfume or the shadow. It had begun this afternoon, the moment I'd used her old, tarnished key to unlock the front door for the first time. I hadn't just opened my new home. I had opened a door for something else, something that had been waiting, patient in the cold ground, for a familiar key to turn. It hadn't broken in. I had invited it. And the final, soul-chilling twist was in the wording of her warning. She didn't say it. She said them. The thing wearing her voice wasn't the intruder. It was the concerned homeowner, warning me about the other things I'd let in with me. The locks on the doors were strong, but they were meaningless. The real threshold had been crossed willingly hours ago, with a turn of a key and a sigh of relief. The horror wasn't outside trying to get in. It was already in the foundation, in the pipes, in the very air, and it had been welcoming me home all along. The second story is about the corrosive power of a friend's betrayal, a horror that wears the mundane mask of a simple favor. My buddy Leo was heading to a week-long tech conference, and his ancient, diabetic cat, Mortimer, needed twice daily insulin shots. "He's a sweet old grump, just needs a quick poke and some wet food," Leo said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Easiest $100 you'll ever make. Spare keys under the grinning garden gnome by the porch." It seemed straightforward. Leo's bungalow was like him, cluttered, cozy, and slightly odd, nestled on a street of nearly identical homes where everyone kept to themselves. The first 3 days were uneventful. Mortimer was a spherical orange creature with judging eyes, the house perpetually smelled of cedar chips and the faint, sweet odor of cat medicine, and I'd do my duties, sometimes lounging on his overstuffed couch watching his massive TV, feeling like I'd gotten the better end of the deal. The change was subtle, beginning on the 4th evening. I just administered the shot, Mortimer's resigned hiss, the prick of the needle, and was channel surfing when I heard it. A sharp, singular tap against the kitchen window above the sink, like a pebble thrown. I muted the TV, the silence suddenly thick. Nothing. Leo's yard was neat, no overhanging branches. I shrugged, assuming a large bug. 5 minutes later, it came again. Tap, 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 a precise, impatient triplet against the living room window to my left. I turned, expecting to see a shape, but saw only the reflection of the room and my own pale face in the dark glass. A cold prickle danced up my neck. I rose and walked to the window, pressing my face close, cupping my hands to block the interior light. The grinning gnome stared emptily from his spot. The street was deserted, bathed in the orange glow of sodium vapor lights. As I turned away, the tapping started again, but now it was a rapid, skittering rhythm, a light pat 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 that moved. It traveled from the living room window to the front door's frosted glass panel, then down the side of the house toward the bedroom, a circuit of attention. Something was outside, methodically testing every potential entry point. My mouth went dry. I crept to the front door through the deadbolt, though I knew it was already locked, and peered through the peephole. The fisheye lens showed a distorted, empty porch. The tapping ceased. For 10 minutes, there was only the hum of the refrigerator and Mortimer's wheezing purr from his favorite cushion. The silence felt like a held breath. I decided to leave, my skin crawling with the unshakable feeling of being studied. As I grabbed my jacket from the back of the dining chair, the house phone on the wall let out a jarring, mechanical ring. Leo, a self-proclaimed analog holdout, kept a landline. Thinking it might be him checking in, I answered. "Hello." What came through was not a voice, but a wet, rhythmic sound. The suction pull of lungs filled with fluid, punctuated by a low, clicking tsk, like a tongue probing the roof of a mouth. It was intimate, obscene. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice tight. The breathing hitched and the clicking accelerated into a frantic staccato. Then, a whisper so clear and close it seemed to originate inside my own ear canal, a secret shared against my brain: "I'm inside the walls." The line went dead with a soft click. I dropped the receiver, which clattered against the wall before dangling by its cord. My eyes, wide with dawning comprehension, scanned the living room. The wallpaper, a faded stripes, the old baseboards, the vents, they weren't just parts of an old house. They were a latticework of hiding places. The thing wasn't outside tapping to get in. It was inside the hollow spaces, tapping to let me know it was there, that it was everywhere. The horror was architectural. As this realization turned my blood to ice, a new tap came, not from a window but from within the wall directly behind the couch, a hollow wooden knock that vibrated through the plaster. Mortimer, who had been asleep, suddenly erupted in a guttural hiss, his back arched, every hair on end, his yellow eyes fixed with predatory intensity on a spot high up on the wall near the ceiling. I followed his gaze. In the corner, a small circular access panel for plumbing, no more than 4 inches in diameter, was slightly ajar, a sliver of deeper black against the shadow. As I watched, paralyzed, a single pale finger slowly curled into view from the darkness, hooking over the lip of the hole. It was too long, the knuckles too prominent, the skin mottled with grime and something that looked like old plaster dust. It didn't beckon. It simply rested there, a quiet, grotesque announcement of occupation. Logic shattered. I didn't scream. A whimper escaped my throat as I backpedaled, grabbed my keys from the counter and fled, leaving the lights blazing, the TV silent, the front door unlocked behind me. I drove 3 blocks before pulling over, my hands shaking too violently to steer. I called Leo. His phone rang 4 times before he answered, the sound of a noisy bar in the background. "Hey man. How's Morty?" he yelled. "Leo, there's something in your house. In the walls." I spat, my voice cracking. The background noise faded as if he'd stepped outside. There was a long, heavy pause. When he spoke again, his voice was flat, drained of all its usual cheer. "Yeah," he sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. "I know." Those 2 words were a sucker punch. It follows warmth. Body heat. The cat's yours. It moves through the spaces between the walls in these old connected bungalows. I thought if I left, if the house went cold and empty for a week, it might move on. Find someone else's heat to follow. The moral horror of his confession unfolded slowly, then all at once. He hadn't hired me to care for his cat. He'd hired me as a thermal decoy, a warm-bodied lure to keep the thing occupied and attached to my presence, hoping it would transfer its attention from him to me, or at least be satiated by my temporary residency. He'd offered me up. The invasion wasn't just the entity in the walls, it was the calculated betrayal by a friend who used my trust as a sacrificial offering. The lock under the gnome wasn't for my convenience, it was the bait in a trap. "Don't go back," he said, his tone shifting to something resembling concern, which now made me sick. I'll have someone else finish the week." The call ended. I sat in my car, the street dark around me, realizing the true depth of the terror. The monster in the walls was a blind, amoral force, a parasite of heat. But Leo, my friend, had made a conscious, cruel choice. He knew, and he gave it my name. The most haunting question, the one that forever twists in my gut, is one I never had the courage to ask. What happened to this someone else, who went in after me? The silence when I think of that is louder than any tap in the dark. The third story is about the silent coup of routine, how something can hollow out your daily life and wear its schedule like a skin suit. This was in my first real apartment after college, a cramped but affordable ground floor studio that smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and the previous tenant's microwave meals. My life was a metronome of predictability. Up at 7, work by 8, home by 6, gym, dinner, a few hours of video games or reading in the worn armchair by the balcony door, then sleep. I prided myself on my awareness, my mental map of the building's soundscape. I knew the cadence of Mrs. Gable's cough upstairs at 10:03 p.m., the feral cat symphony in the alley around midnight, the distant wail of the 2:15 a.m. freight train 3 miles away, the garbage trucks roaring crescendo at 5:45 a.m. For 3 months, this rhythm was my armor. Then the emails began. They would arrive every night, without fail, at 3:07 a.m., slicing into the deepest part of the night's silence. The sender was always a string of garbled numbers followed by a generic free email domain. The subject line was a constant, chilling reassurance: "You are safe." The body contained only a single, bizarre sentence: The first one read, "The salt on the windowsill is sufficient." I had no salt on my windowsill. I deleted it, annoyed by spam's increasing creativity. The next night, 3:07 a.m., "You are safe. The chair under the doorknob is a good idea." I used a deadbolt, not a chair. A cold worm of unease turned in my stomach. Was someone watching me? I checked the blinds, scanned the dark balcony, saw nothing but my own pale reflection. The emails persisted. "You are safe. The noise from the air vent is just the building settling." I hadn't heard any noise from the vent. That night, lying rigid in bed, waiting for the phantom vibration, I heard it, a faint, metallic scrape like something dragging slowly across the inside of the ductwork. The email had not described my reality, it had dictated it. It was writing a script, and my environment was obediently performing. This was psychological colonization, a hack of my perception. The next email read, "You are safe. The figure in the hallway mirror is a trick of the light." I hadn't seen a figure. But now, every time I passed the small mirror by the door, my peripheral vision screamed of movement. I took the mirror down. My routine, my source of comfort, was now a minefield navigated by emailed instructions. The terror wasn't in a physical threat, but in the erasure of my own judgment. The climax was a Tuesday, the air in the apartment stale and heavy. The email arrived at 3:07 a.m. as I stared, sleepless, at my phone's glow. "You are safe. Your breathing is too loud. You will wake it. Hold your breath until the clock ticks again." As I read the words, I became hyper-aware of the raspy, rhythmic sound of my own inhalation and exhalation. It did sound deafening in the utter silence. And then, underneath it, I heard a new sound, one absent from my carefully catalogued auditory map. A slow, shuffling drag accompanied by a soft, wet plink, 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 like water dripping from a soaked garment. It was just outside my apartment door. The email was not a warning. It was a command from a disembodied authority that had proven it could shape my reality. The primal part of my brain, desperate for any rule to follow in the chaos, overrode the screaming rational part. I held my breath. My lungs burned, screaming for oxygen. My vision sparked at the edges. The digital clock on my microwave ticked from 3:08 to 3:09. The moment it changed, the shuffling outside stopped. The dripping ceased. I gasped in a ragged, desperate breath, the sound obscenely loud. Immediately, my phone vibrated with a new email, timestamp 3:09. "Good. You are learning. You are safe. Now look under the bed." I didn't want to. Every cell in my body revolted. But the command was absolute. The entity had bypassed every physical lock by worming into my phone, my routine, my very need for safety instructions. It had made me an accomplice in my own terror. I had obeyed once. The pattern was set. Slowly, mechanically, I rolled onto my side, the sheets cold against my skin. I leaned over the edge of the mattress, my heart hammering a frantic drum solo against my ribs, and I looked down into the dark space beneath my bed. The weak light from the street lamp outside filtered through the blinds, illuminating dust bunnies, a lost sock, and an old, empty shoebox. Nothing else. A wave of dizzying, almost nauseating relief washed over me. It was a cruel joke. A final, twisted test I had passed. Then my phone vibrated one last time on the nightstand. A final email. With trembling hands, I lifted it. The screen's light was a blinding blue in the dark room. The message read, "You are safe. I am under the bed. You are looking at the wrong side." The meaning did not dawn, it detonated. A silent, shockwave of comprehension that turned my bones to water. I was looking down from the top of the mattress. It was telling me it was on the underside, clinging to the box springs above the floor, its face separated from mine by mere inches of fabric, padding, and slats. The weight on the mattress, the slight dip I'd attributed to an old spring, it hadn't just been me. It had been there with me, inverted, a silent passenger in my sleep, feeling the warmth of my body through the bedding, listening to the rhythm of my heart, while its emails calmly, methodically dismantled my sanity. The invasion was total, a perfect parasitic integration. The locks were irrelevant. The monster wasn't outside the door. It wasn't even in the room with me. It had fused itself to the underside of my world, to the very structure of my refuge. And the most profound, the most soul-corrupting horror of it all, the twist that still echoes in my quiet moments, is that in that instant of absolute, devastating clarity, I felt a surge of profound, shameful gratitude. It had told me. The script was complete. The mystery was solved. I finally knew the source of the dread. And in a perverse way, that knowledge did make me feel safe. Because the defined horror, the named and located terror, is somehow more manageable than the formless, whispering unknown. I never moved out. I still live here. The email stopped that night. The external sounds never returned. My routine re-established itself, but now it includes a new, unspoken ritual. Every night as I slip into bed, I say aloud to the empty room, "I am safe." And from somewhere impossibly close, from the space between the mattress and the floor, I often hear a soft, damp, approving click in the darkness. It is not a threat. It is an affirmation. We have an understanding now. It showed me the rules and I learned to follow them. The true home invasion was not of my apartment, but of my mind, and once I accepted the new landlord, the terror simply became cohabitation.